Hi, my name is Linda Noss, and today I'm going to show you how to create a new object. Objects are the basis for everything we do in Java. Everything you've done so far, you've been doing it within an object. And it's also called object-oriented programming, or OOP. So this is the basis for the whole programming language. So I'm going to start by just creating a new project. There we go. I'm going to call it library to start with. Create it. And there's my new project, and then I'm going to be creating a new class within the project, and I'm going to call it book. Okay, now, object, you have to define object in terms of its instance variables. Now, what am I talking about? So basically, a book, if you think about a book in real life, you think of a book, and you can describe a book by its genre, the author, the title, the publishing company, the copyright date, the ISBN number, or many other things about a book. Number of pages, the cover art. But what we're going to do today is going to keep it really simple. So I'm going to open up the book object right here, and we're going to see that I'm going to keep this first piece of code right here, but I'm going to get rid of the second piece of code down here at the bottom. I won't need that right now. And then I'm going to basically describe the book in terms of its instance variables. An instance variable is a variable that you're going to use to describe whatever the object is. In this case, it's a book. So we're going to go with something very simple. I'm just going to use two. I'm going to use the title of the book and the author of the book. The title of a book is a group of words, so that is of string type. And the author of the book is also a group of words. So I'm also going to call that string type. Oops, sorry. Okay, so there's a title and an author. We could put as many instance variables here as we wanted. The more you put in, the larger your object's going to be. So we're just going to keep it straightforward this time on your first one. And we're just going to put in the string title and the string author. Now, we have to tell the computer that when we create an object of type book, how to create it. And that's what our constructors are for. How do you construct a book? So we're going to start with a constructor called a default constructor. And in the default constructor, it's used to set your instance variables equal to their default values. And more likely than not, with integers that would be 0, with anything of type of an object type, such as a string, that would be null, and so forth and so on. So basically, we're going to take the title and set it equal to null, and we're going to take the author, and that's also type string, so we're also going to type that and use it null. And so basically we have two variables now both set to null. Now you're not going to understand this 100%, I don't think, until we actually get into creating books and using them in the main program. So if you could just hold on to doing it this way to start with, then you'll see when we get to the other side of the programming how it's used. So essentially this is the default constructor. Now I can have more than one type of constructor. I can have a constructor that says, well, what happens if when you create the book, you know what the title and the author are? So how do I bring that information into my object so that I can set the title and the author up right from the beginning? Now that kind of constructor is called a normal constructor, and the way you do that is you basically type the word public, just like we did up here, and the word book. And when you do this, you got to make sure that whatever you called this file is the same thing you're calling your constructor. And capitalization is important, so it's got to be exactly the same. So in a normal constructor, we're bringing information in to the object from somewhere else. And in this particular case, we're bringing in a title and an author. So what I want to do is I want to set up two parameters. and they're both type string that represent the title and the author. And I've just used T and A as my variable names. So basically, I've set up my constructor, and this is my normal constructor, and now I want to do exactly what we did up here. Is I want to set my title and my author equal to something. So I'm just going to grab this information here. I'm going to copy it. I'm going to paste it down in here. And instead of setting is equal to null, I want to set them into the information from my parameter list. So the title is T, and the author is A. And so that sets up what we call our normal constructor. So if I'm going to put some comments up here, okay. Now what I've done is I've given whoever wants to use the book object two different ways of creating the book object. The first way is when, if you create the object, you don't know what the title and the author is. And the second way is if you do know what the title and the author are. So that basically is my constructors. Now there's one other thing I want to be able to do with my object is I want to print out the object. So if I were writing a program and wanted to use the book object and I needed to see what information was in the book object, I could print that information out. So I have to create a method called a toString method. And I do that by creating public. Now the toString method actually sets up a string and sends it back to the main program. So I have to have a return of a string type, and this is called a toString method. Now the toString method is a pretty standard method. It's used every time you want to print the specs or the information about the object back on the main class. And it's also called the default method because if you don't specify what method to use, it automatically uses the string method. And we'll talk more about this when we get to the other side and we start printing out the books. So how do you create one? Well, it's a method, so it starts like any other method. You need your curly braces. And then I'm going to set up a string variable. I'm just going to call it str. And I'm going to give a little title here. Specs. Okay, so I'll give a little title there. And whenever you print something out, you have to remember that the people that are going to be seeing your printouts are not normally programmers. They're going to be like people who buy a program and stuff is going to print out on the screen. So you always have to be realistic about what you're printing out. So this is why I gave a little title right here, so that if this were to be used, it would be obvious what it was that I was printing out. So then all I'm going to do is I'm going to take the str variable and add to it. So I'm going to just keep adding to it with a plus equal sign. And then I'm going to have a new line, and then I'm going to tab over. Those are called escape characters, and this gives you a carriage return, and this gives you a tab if you haven't seen those already. And then I'm just going to start printing out my specs. On the next line, I'm going to do the same thing for the author. And then it's a method, and I'm returning a string object back out to the main program, so I have to have a return here. So there is my toString method. Okay. Save that. And compile it. And I have no compilation errors. So that's basically the beginning of the book object. And you can see that I try to organize all my work and keep things kind of grouped together. So, I got to put my name up here. Yeah, this is person number 1. So basically, it compiles still. So there you go. So I'm going to stop here, and I want you to create this object the same way I have. And then when you're done with that, come back and see the second part of this series. Thank you, and we'll see you in a little bit.